The fog was thick that night, curling around my ankles like slow, whispering fingers. The forest felt alive in a way that made my chest tighten. Not with fear exactly, but with a strange, impossible awareness, as if the trees themselves were watching. The path was barely visible beneath the trembling pale light that filtered through the dense canopy, and every footstep I took echoed like a confession. Somewhere far off, a creek gurgled quietly, but its sound was strangely distorted, almost deliberate. I kept telling myself I was alone, but then the rustling started. A soft, patient scratching, like claws tracing bark. It didn't sound wild or natural, just raw and deliberate, patient. I froze, my breath fog in front of my face, each inhale trembling in the cold air. The further I went, the heavier the silence became, as if the forest itself were holding its breath with me. A faint humming rose beneath the static of the night, just beyond the reach of understanding. That's when I saw it, or maybe it saw me first. A shadow, stretching taller than any tree, shifting against the fog. And in that pale light, I realized it wasn't moving the way shadows should. I never should have walked this trail alone. It was late autumn, the kind of evening where daylight thins without warning. I was walking a narrow mountain trail, pine needles damp beneath my boots, air cold enough to sting my lungs. The forest smelled of sap and wet earth. Everything felt ordinary, quiet. Then the hum began, low, melodic, almost gentle. It slipped between the trees like breath through teeth. Not loud, not close, but present. I stopped walking. The trail held still with me. Fog crept in from the slope below, curling around my ankles, cool and faintly metallic on my skin. The hum didn't fade. It adjusted, as if it knew I was listening. I told myself it was wind, air moving through branches at the right angle. Yet the pine stood rigid. No sway, no rustling, only the hum. I stepped forward. The sound shifted again, not louder, nearer. Fog thickened with each step, climbing my legs, soft against my knees, carrying the scent of cold stone and old leaves. The trail narrowed. Tree trunks leaned inward, their bark dark and slick. Shadows pressed in between them. Something moved at the edge of my vision. I turned. Nothing there, but the fog pulsed, slow and deliberate, as though breathing. The hum changed pitch. Just slightly. It felt welcoming. My chest tightened. Curiosity pulled stronger than fear. I followed. The forest deepened around me, light dissolving into pale gray. The sky lost somewhere above the canopy. Shadows flickered along the trunks, not attached to branches, not shaped like leaves. They slid, paused, then vanished. My skin prickled with cold. Goosebumps rose beneath my sleeves. The hum layered itself now, not one tone, but several woven together, soft and patient. I noticed my steps were quieter than before. The ground felt padded, as if the trail absorbed sound. I slowed my breathing. The forest did not respond. Fog climbed higher, brushing my wrists, cool and damp, leaving my fingers numb. A shape formed ahead, just a bend in the trail. I thought, just thicker fog. But it held its outline when I blinked. Tall, narrow. It dissolved when I stepped closer, breaking apart like mist touched by warmth. The hum deepened. I realized then it wasn't coming from ahead. It was everywhere. Inside the trees. Inside the ground. Inside my chest. Each breath I took felt slightly out of time, as though something else inhaled just after me. The forest felt aware. Not watching. Listening. I stopped again. The hum did not. Fog pressed against my face, cold on my lips, tasting faintly of iron. A shadow slid across the trail behind me. I didn't turn. The pines creaked softly, with shifting without wind. The hum softened, almost tender now, as if urging me forward. I took one more step. Then another. The trail dipped, vanishing into a pocket of deeper gray. I felt the weight of the forest settle on my shoulders, a gentle pressure, like hands resting there. I understood, without knowing how, that following the sound was a choice, and that the forest would remember which one I made. I stood there for a long time, breath shallow, ears ringing with that low, patient melody. When I finally turned back, The hum faded only slightly, as if disappointed. Even as I walked away, it followed, not behind me, but within the fog, waiting, humming softly among the pines. The cabin sat where the trail narrowed, half hidden by pine and shadow. It was late autumn, cold enough that my breath stayed close to my face. The moon hung low, pale and distant, caught between bare branches. I hadn't planned to stop, but the fog thickened behind me. Ahead, the trail felt unfinished. The cabin door leaned open, just enough to notice, just enough to feel invited. Would smell damp and old, rot and pine resin mixing in the air. The floor creaked under my weight, soft and tired. Inside, silence pressed close. Not empty, waiting. Moonlight slipped through broken boards, cutting the room into sharp angles. Light where light shouldn't bend. Shadows stretched longer than the walls could hold. I stood still, listening. A step answered me. Not mine. It came from behind the wall. Slow, careful. The boards beneath my feet cooled, the chill seeping through my boots. The air tasted dusty, stale, like it hadn't moved in years. Another step, then another. They followed a pattern. 3 soft presses, a pause, then 2 quick ones. I tried to match it with my own weight. The cabin responded differently, as if it knew the rhythm better than I did. The steps circled, never close enough to touch, never far enough to ignore. Moonlight shifted. The angles changed without the moon moving. Shadows slid across the walls, crawling, bending around corners that weren't there before. I held my breath. The cabin did not. A slow creak answered from the ceiling, then from beneath the floor. Footsteps below me. I hadn't heard a door open, hadn't heard anyone enter, yet the sound rose through the boards, steady and patient. I could feel it now, a vibration through the soles of my feet, through the old wood. The smell changed. Cold air mixed with something metallic, faint, unfamiliar. I moved 1 step back. The sound stopped. Silence fell hard, heavy, so thick it pressed against my ears. Then a single step behind me, close enough that the air shifted, close enough that my skin tightened. I didn't turn. The moonlight felt wrong at my back, as if it didn't want me to see what it was touching. The boards creaked again, not randomly, not tired with settling, intentional. The steps traced the edges of the room, each corner acknowledged, each wall measured. I could sense where it was without seeing it, the way you know someone is standing too close in the dark. The cabin felt smaller, walls leaning inward, the ceiling lowering by inches at a time. I thought about the trail outside, the fog, how quiet the forest had been compared to this. A step echoed near the door, then another on the porch. The door didn't move, but the hinges whispered. Cold brushed my neck, a breath that didn't belong to me. I swallowed. The sound felt too loud. The steps returned inside. Faster now, impatient. Moonlight fractured across the floor, angles twisting, lines crossing where nothing stood. A shadow stretched toward me, detached from any body, its edges trembling, uncertain. I closed my eyes. Just for a moment, the footsteps stopped. When I opened them, the cabin was still, too still. No creaking, no breath, no movement at all. I backed toward the door, each step deliberate, careful not to invite another answer. The floor stayed silent, as if holding itself together. Outside, fog pressed against the windows, thick and pale. Waiting, I stepped out. The door didn't follow me closed. Behind me, one last creak. Soft, almost polite. I didn't look back. The cabin faded into shadow as I returned to the trail, but the pattern stayed with me. 3 steps, a pause, 2 more. Even as the forest swallowed the sound, I knew the silence behind me wasn't empty. The trail narrowed as evening settled in. Late autumn, the kind of cold that crept through fabric and rested against the bones. Fog drifted between the pines, slow and patient. It clung to my ankles, brushed my knees. Each step stirred the scent of wet earth and old needles. I had been walking longer than planned, long enough that the mountain felt unfamiliar, long enough that silence no longer felt empty. That was when I noticed a light, a soft glow ahead, low to the ground, steady, warm, and impossibly calm. A lantern. It hung just beyond the curve of the trail, its glass halo muted by fog, not swinging, not flickering, simply waiting. The air around it felt different, less cold, as if the fog itself hesitated there. I slowed my pace, my breath fog in front of me, uneven and loud in my ears. The hum from earlier, faint, almost remembered, seemed to fold into quiet. With every step, shadows shifted along the trees. They stretched toward the lantern, then recoiled. Branches creaked softly, like knuckles flexing. I expected to see someone standing near it. A hiker, a ranger, anyone. But as I drew closer, there was only the lantern. Its metal frame was warm when I reached out. Not hot, just alive with heat. My fingers lingered there longer than they should have. The warmth soaked into my skin, chased a chill from my palm. It felt comforting and wrong. Fog thickened around me, closing in behind. The trail vanished in pale folds. Even the trees seemed farther away. I listened, not for footsteps, for breathing. There was none. Yeah, I couldn't shake the feeling of being observed. Not watched from afar, but watched closely, intimately. Shadows began to move. Not quickly, not suddenly. They slid along the trunks, stretching and compressing as if testing their shapes. They leaned inward, forming dark arcs at the edge of the light. The lantern's glow trembled then. Not a flicker, more like a sigh. I glanced behind me. The fog had erased everything I came from. Ahead, the trail dissolved into white silence. When I looked back at the lantern, the shadows were closer. They crawled along the ground, overlapping, pooling beneath my boots. I felt their chill through the soles, a creeping numbness. The warmth from the lantern remained steady, inviting, patient. I waited for fear to take over, for my body to run. Instead, wonder settled in my chest. Heavy, quiet. I lifted the lantern slightly. It didn't resist. Its handle fit my grip too well. As I held it up, the fog responded. Shapes emerged between the trees. Tall, narrow, never fully formed. They leaned toward the light, then away, as if afraid of being seen clearly. Their edges blurred, trembling like reflections in disturbed water. A soft rustling followed me as I took a step forward. Leaves shifted without wind. Branches whispered without breath. I stopped, so did everything else. No rustling, no hum, no movement, only the lantern's glow, and my pulse heavy in my ears. The silence pressed close. It felt thick, like it pulled over my head. I set the lantern back down where I found it. The warmth lingered on my skin, even as I pulled away. When I straightened, the fog seemed closer to my face. Cold brushed my cheek. A breath that wasn't mine. I didn't turn. Behind me, something shifted. Not a step, not a sound, just a presence adjusting its weight. The shadows withdrew slowly, slipping back into the trees. The lantern dimmed, its glow softening until it barely cut through the mist. I took one step back. Then another. The trail reappeared beneath my feet, faint but familiar. The fog loosened its grip reluctantly. When I looked again, the lantern was gone. No warmth, no light, only damp leaves and pale silence. The forest resumed its quiet watch. Patient, knowing. I stood there longer than I meant to, breathing shallow, listening for something I couldn't name. Eventually I walked on, but the warmth stayed with me, deep in my hands, as if I had carried something out of the fog. And somewhere behind me, just out of sight, the darkness seemed to lean forward, waiting for the light to return. The ridge opened suddenly, like the mountain had pulled back a curtain. I stepped out of the trees and into thin air, rock under my boots, cold brushing my wrists. The sky stretched wide and empty above me, washed pale by moonlight just beginning to rise. The wind moved first, not strong, not violent. It slid across the ridge in slow waves, threading between stones, slipping through gaps in the rock. And it whistled, low, almost careful. The The sound wrapped around my ears and settled somewhere behind my eyes. It wasn't sharp like a storm wind. It carried shape, tone. I paused, breath foggy in front of my face. The air smelled thin, metallic, old. The whistle rose again. This time it bent. It curved into something familiar. A cadence I knew. My own breathing shifted without permission. Shallow, listening. The fog below the ridge swelled upward, curling over the edge like a slow tide. It erased the trail behind me, then the trees, then the sound of the forest itself. Only the wind remained. It moved across the ridge in loops now, circling me, testing distance. The whistle stretched longer, dragged in, and then it said my name. Not clearly, not fully formed. Just enough shape to make my chest tighten. I didn't answer. My mouth felt dry, numb. Cold seeped through my jacket and pressed against my spine. The wind shifted again. This time it carried words, fragments, half-breaths, broken sentences that didn't quite exist. They echoed off the rocks, bounced back wrong, returned distorted. I turned slowly, scanning the ridge. Moonlight slid across jagged stone, casting shadows that leaned too far, stretched too long. Each one seemed to pause when I looked at it, as if listening back. The whistle deepened. It grew layered, multiple tones overlapping, braiding together. And underneath it all, my voice, not as I remembered it, but as if something had tried to rebuild it from memory alone. Too flat, too hollow. The wind spoke in my rhythm, my pauses, my breath. I took one careful step forward. The sound followed instantly. Closer. I stopped. So did it. The silence pressing hard, thick as the fog crawling up my calves. Then the wind exhaled again, long and strained, and the voice returned, mine but desperate. It called out as if lost, as if hurt. My stomach twisted. My hands shook at my sides, fingers numb with cold and something else. Recognition. The ridge felt smaller now, narrower. The fog climbed higher, lapping at my knees, then my waist, soft and damp against my skin. The whistle circled faster. The words unraveled, voices overlapping voices, each one wearing my tone differently. Some sounded afraid, some pleading. One laughed quietly, breathless and wrong. I squeezed my eyes shut. The wind didn't stop. It pressed closer, moving across my face, my neck, my ears, warm in places it shouldn't be. When I opened my eyes again, the shadows had shifted. They leaned toward me now, stretching up the rocks, pulling away from their sources. The moon hung low, distorted by fog, its light flickering like it might blink out. The wind whispered again. Clearer. You're here. My knees locked. My breath stuttered. That wasn't the wind. That was something wearing it. The whistle collapsed into silence all at once, leaving a pressure behind, like the world had inhaled and forgotten how to breathe out. I stood alone on the ridge, fog swallowed my legs, moonlight trembling above. Then, softly, the wind began again, not whistling this time, learning. Autumn had settled deep into the mountains by then. The trail was buried beneath layers of leaves, damp and dark, pressed flat by time and weather. Each step carried a soft, dragging hush, not quite silence, not quite sound. The air smelled of rot and cold earth. It clung to my throat when I breathed. Fog rested low between the trunks, thin as gauze, brushing my knees as I walked. It moved when I did, paused when I paused. I told myself that was normal, that forests breathe. The leaves were everywhere, red, brown, yellow, crumbling beneath my boots, cool and slick, like something alive beneath a thin skin. I felt watched, not from above, from below. I stopped walking. The forest did not. A faint rustle drifted through the leaves at my feet, too deliberate to be wind, too slow to be an animal fleeing. I stared down. At first, I saw nothing but color and shadow. Then, something caught the pale light. Two small reflections. Dull, wet eyes. They stared back through the leaves. I didn't breathe, didn't move. My skin prickled with cold, as if the ground itself exhaled. The eyes were low, too low to belong to anything standing, too still to be passing through. I blinked. They were gone. The leaves lay flat again, perfectly ordinary, perfectly quiet. I laughed under my breath. The sound came out thin and wrong. Just animals, I thought, just tricks of light. But my hands were shaking. I kept walking. Every step felt heavier, as though the trail resisted me. The leaves clung to my boots, whispering as I pulled free. That whisper followed, spreading outward, circling me. I smelled something faint beneath the rot. Warm, alive. I slowed. More movement rippled ahead, a shiver beneath the leaves, like something adjusting its weight. I didn't want to look, but I did. Eyes again. This time, many. They dotted the ground on both sides of the trail. Some close, some far, all watching, none blinking. My chest tightened. Each breath felt loud, invasive, as if the forest could hear my lungs working. The fog thickened, pressing close to the ground, wrapping around my ankles. The eyes did not move. They waited. I took one careful step back. The leaves shifted in response. A synchronized ripple. The eyes vanished all at once. Silence followed, not the peaceful kind, the kind that listens. I stood there, heart pounding, ears straining. The forest felt closer than before, intimate, aware. I had the sudden, unbearable thought that the leaves weren't hiding things. They were part of them. The trail curved ahead, swallowed by fog and trees. Turning back felt wrong. Staying still felt worse. I moved forward. The ground seemed softer now, uneven, as if hollow in places. With each step, I felt small movements beneath the leaves, not fleeing, repositioning. Something brushed my ankle. Cold, dry. I gasped and jumped back. Nothing followed. No pursuit, just the slow settling of leaves. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly aware of how exposed I was. No barriers, no walls, just me walking through a thinking place. The fog lifted slightly, revealing more of the forest floor. And there, near a fallen log, eyes surfaced again, larger this time. They weren't animal eyes. They were too round, too still, too knowing. Regret washed over me, heavy and sour. A deep sense that I had missed a moment long ago when turning back was still possible. I blinked. Gone. The trail ahead darkened, the leaves thickening until the ground disappeared beneath color and decay. Every step felt like stepping onto a watching body. The forest leaned inward. Branches creaked overhead, not breaking. Listening. I kept my eyes forward after that. I didn't want to see what waited beneath my feet, but I felt them, everywhere, tracking the rhythm of my walk. When I finally stopped, the forest stopped too. The leaves were perfectly still. I stood alone on the trail, surrounded by fog, heart racing, skin cold. Nothing moved, yet I knew with quiet certainty that the ground beneath me had not stopped watching. The trail narrowed as the pines grew closer together. Late evening. The last light drained from the sky, leaving everything washed in gray. Fog hung low, brushing my knees, cold and damp against my skin. The air smelled like sap and wet soil. Still, too still. Then the hum returned. Not loud, not sharp, a soft, trembling vibration threading through the trees, like static caught between radio stations, like something trying to remember melody. It pressed gently against my ears, against my chest. I stopped walking. The hum did not. It wavered, shifted, adjusting itself, as if it noticed me noticing it. The fog thickened between the trunks, curling in slow, deliberate motions. Pale light bled to the mist, then faded. Shadows stretched longer than they should have, bending around bark and root. I took one step forward. The hum deepened, not louder, closer. It slipped under my skin, a fine vibration in my bones. My breath caught, white and shallow. The air tasted metallic, dry, like old batteries. Static crackled faintly in the distance, or maybe inside my head. I turned my head slowly. The trees leaned inward, their needles whispering without wind. Their silhouettes no longer matched the ground beneath them. When I moved, the shadows moved too. Not delayed, not mirrored. They curved, adjusted, responded. Another step. The hum shivered. It broke into layers now. Thin threads of vibration crossing and recrossing, weaving something I couldn't see. Each pulse seemed to ask a question. The fog brushed my wrists, cold and clinging. I pulled my arms closer, heart tapping unevenly in my chest. I realized then, the hum was not filling the forest. It was tracking me. I froze. The vibration softened. Waited. Silence pressing from above, heavy and expectant. Somewhere far away, something rustled once, then went quiet. I swallowed. The static flared. Not sound alone. Pressure. The tree trunks warped subtly, bending inward as if listening. Their shadows leaned toward me, dark shapes stretching across the trail, touching my boots. I stepped back. The hum snapped. A sharp, broken tremor rippled through the pines. Needles shook without falling. The fog recoiled, then rushed forward again. My skin prickled, every nerve awake, every instinct screaming to leave. But the trail ahead felt heavier, as if the air itself had weight. I moved sideways, slow and careful. The static followed. It wrapped tighter, vibrating behind my eyes. My breath echoed wrong, too many times, too close together. Each inhale returned to me, warped, delayed. The shadows no longer matched my movements. They lagged, then rushed ahead. One bent toward me, folding along the ground like spilled ink. I backed away again, pulse pounding in my ears. The hum rose and fell, matching the rhythm of my steps. It knew. Panic bloomed, cold and sudden. My hands trembled. My boots sank slightly into damp earth that felt warmer than it should have. I turned sharply. The forest behind me looked thinner, less real. Static crackled between the trees, like invisible wires brushing together. Dark shapes bowed inward, almost forming corridors. I started walking faster. The hum swelled, layered now with faint clicks and pops, like whispered signals. The fog surged, pressing close to my face, damp and sour. My breath came fast. Too loud. Each step sent a ripple through the vibration, and each ripple returned stronger. The hum reacted, learned. I broke into a run. The forest answered. Static screamed silently, a pressure that made my teeth ache. Shadows stretched and snapped back, racing alongside me. The fog twisted into coils that brushed my shoulders, my neck. Something brushed my arm. Not solid, just vibration. I stumbled, catching myself against a tree trunk slick with moss. The bark felt wrong, warm, faintly pulsing beneath my palm. I yanked my hand away. The hum collapsed into a single, focused tremor. Right behind me. I didn't turn. I stood there, shaking, breath ragged, listening as the vibration settled, as if satisfied. Slowly, carefully, I stepped forward once more. The hum softened, retreated into the pines. The shadows relaxed, slipping back into place. The fog loosened its grip. Silence returned, but it felt borrowed. I continued down the trail, every step measured, heart still racing. The static lingered faintly, threading through the trees, waiting. Even now, long after I left the pines behind, I can still feel it, that quiet vibration, as if something learned how I move, how I breathe, and is listening for me again. The trail narrowed just after dusk. Not sharply, not enough to warn me. It simply dipped, pine needles thin beneath my boots, replaced by packed earth that felt damp and hollow, like it had been walked on too many times without ever being seen. The air cooled in a way that didn't match the hour. My breath turned pale too quickly, drifting forward and sinking instead of rising. Fog gathered low here, not rolling, waiting. It pooled in the hollow like something poured deliberately, clinging to my ankles, brushing the backs of my calves with a cold that felt measured. The trees leaned inward, their trunks dark and tall, swallowing what little light remained. Above me, the sky dulled into a colorless ceiling, as if depth itself had been removed. Every step sounded wrong. The ground absorbed my footfalls, muting them halfway through, leaving a soft, unfinished echo behind. I paused, listening, my ears filled with a low pressure, like silence being pressed into place. Then the whispers came. Not voices. Not yet. They slid to the fog in thin ripples, brushing past my ears without direction. Words tried to form but fell apart before meaning settled. Breath moved with them, cold, damp, and close enough to feel against my neck. I stood still. The fog tightened. It curled higher now, wrapping my knees, my waist, creeping toward my chest with slow patience that made my skin prickle. Somewhere ahead, something shifted. Not a step, not a branch, just a sense of space rearranging itself. I took another step. The hollow deepened. Light thinned until it felt strained, as though it had to work to exist here. My shadow stretched too long, bending away from me, breaking apart the edges. It didn't quite match my movements anymore. The whispers changed. They followed my pace now, rising when I moved, fading when I stopped. The fog pulsed with it. Each breath of mine answered by a softer one that wasn't mine. The air smelled old, wet stone, cold bark, something faintly metallic. I told myself I was alone. The hollow disagreed. Cold pressed against my back, then my shoulders, as if unseen shapes were leaning closer, curious but restrained. The trees no longer creaked. No rustling. No insects. Even the hum I'd grown used had thinned into a distant static, stretched and distant, like a signal struggling to pass through. I swallowed. The sound felt loud. Immediately, the whispers sharpened, gathering around that single noise. I caught fragments then, half-formed phrases, broken reflections of thought, not spoken to me, spoken through me. The fog shifted aside just enough to reveal movement along the ground. Not shadows. Not exactly. Impressions formed where nothing stepped, slight depressions appearing and vanishing in the earth, pacing alongside me, tracing my path with perfect patience. My chest tightened. The air grew colder still. It settled into my lungs like something heavy, each breath leaving a thin ache behind. The hollow seemed to stretch longer than it should have. The trees repeated themselves, familiar shapes returning too soon, like the trail was looping quietly while pretending not to. I slowed, so did everything else. The fog thickened, swallowing distance. Whispers brushed closer now, grazing my ears with warmth that didn't belong in the cold. The silence between them felt crowded, full of waiting. Something passed behind me. I didn't turn. The pressure of it lingered, a presence close enough to disturb the fog, close enough that the cold shifted direction. I could feel it tracing my outline, learning it. My breath came shallow. The hollow seemed to listen. The ground dipped once more, then began to rise, slowly releasing me. The fog thinned by degrees, peeling away reluctantly. The whispers faded, retreating into something softer, something almost disappointed. When I reached the edge of the hollow, the air warmed just enough to notice. Sound returned cautiously, the faint rustle of distant branches, the hum finding its place again among the pines. I stopped, looked back. The trail behind me was smooth and untouched. No fog, no hollow, just trees standing where they always had. But the cold stayed with me, and long after I stepped forward, I could still feel the shape of that place clinging to my breath, as if part of me hadn't quite made it out. The ridge opened suddenly. One step, and the trees fell away. The next, and the moon found me. It was late autumn, cold enough that my breath showed, thin and pale. The trail narrowed into stone and gravel, sharp under my boots. Above me, the sky was clear, too clear. The moon hung low and full, not bright, watching. Its light spilled across the ridge in long, silver sheets. Every rock caught it. Every pine needle glimmered like wet glass. The air smelled of frost and old bark. Still, no wind, no insects, only my breath, slow and careful. Shadows stretched ahead of me, too far, too thin. They didn't match the shapes that cast them. Some leaned sideways, some bent uphill. One reached back toward me. Even when I stepped forward, I paused. The gravel shifted under my heel. That single scrape echoed longer than it should have. It came back to me thinner, lighter, almost amused. I kept walking. The ridge curved like a spine. Pines lined it on both sides, their trunks black against the moon. Between them, gaps opened and closed as I moved. Dark spaces where something could stand. Or wait. A silhouette crossed the trail ahead. Quick, low to the ground. Gone before I could focus. I told myself it was a trick of contrast. Moonlight playing with my tired eyes. But my shoulders stayed tight. My hands felt numb, even inside my gloves. Another shape appeared, this one farther away. Tall, too narrow. It stood between two trees, just off the ridge. The moon carved its outline clean and sharp. No features, just a darker piece of night, standing upright where nothing should be. I stopped breathing. The cold pressed against my throat. My chest burned, asking for air. I blinked. The space was empty. I let the breath out slowly. It trembled, drifted away like smoke. The forest did not react. I took another step, then another. Each footfall felt loud, too solid, as if the ridge itself was listening, counting. The shadows shifted again. Not all at once, one at a time. They slid along the ground, changing places when I wasn't looking directly at them. Something moved behind me. Not fast, not hiding, just relocating. I didn't turn. The back of my neck prickled. A faint chill traced my spine, like fingers hovering just above the skin. Close enough to feel, not close enough to touch. The moonlight ahead dimmed for a moment. Not a cloud, not a blink. It thinned, as if something tall had passed between me and the sky. I heard gravel shift again. Behind me, soft, measured. I stopped. The ridge fell silent. No footsteps followed. No breath that wasn't mine. When I moved again, the sound returned. Perfectly matched. My pace, my pauses. I reached a clearing at the ridge's highest point. The trees pulled back, leaving a bowl of stone and pale grass. Moonlight flooded it, smooth and unreal. In the center stood a shape. Not solid, not moving. A silhouette, cut from shadow, standing where the light should have erased it. Its edges wavered, like heat over asphalt. Its height shifted when I tried to judge it. I raised my hand. The silhouette raised its own. The motion wasn't mirrored. It lagged, as if it had to remember how. A sharp, cold pressure settled in my chest. Regret, sudden and heavy. The feeling that I had come too far to pretend this was nothing. I lowered my hand. It followed. The moon brightened. The shadow thinned. Split. Where one shape stood, there were now several, scattered among the trees. Never twice in the same place. They didn't approach. They didn't retreat. They watched. I backed away, slow, careful not to turn my back. The gravel whispered under my boots. Each whisper answered by another, out of rhythm. At the edge of the clearing, the fog returned. It spilled over the ridge like breath over glass. Soft, quiet. The silhouettes faded into it. Not gone, just absorbed. The moon remained, bright, indifferent. I stepped back onto the trail. The ridge closed behind me. Shadows fell back into place, pretending to belong. But the feeling stayed, that even in full moonlight, I was not alone. The trail narrows as night settles in. Tall pines lean inward, their needles brushing together, releasing a cold, green scent that clings to my clothes. Fog hangs low, pressing against my knees, then my waist, as if it's learning the shape of me. The air feels heavier here, thicker. Each step sinks softly into damp earth and fallen needles. The ground gives back a muted echo, almost like it's listening. I pause. Silence stretches. Not empty silence. Waiting silence. Then it happens. A cold exhale brushes the back of my neck. Not wind. Too close. Too warm at first, then sharply cold. My shoulders tense. My breath stutters. I tell myself it's the forest, cooling. Night air shifting. But the trees are still. No rustling. No sway. The fog doesn't move. I take one careful breath in. Pine. Damp bark. Something faintly metallic. Behind me, another breath. It matches mine. The timing is exact. The length, the slight hitch at the end. I freeze. My heart pounds so hard I feel in my jaw, in my fingertips. The sound of blood fills my ears, thick and rushing, but beneath everything, breathing, slow, patient, close. I don't turn around. The trail ahead looks suddenly unreal, like a memory I'm trying to walk into. Pale light filters weakly through the fog, stretching my shadow long and thin across the ground. I swallow. The breath behind me changes. It adjusts when I adjust, slows when I slow. I hold my breath. So does it. The silence that follows is unbearable. My lungs burn. My chest tightens. I exhale sharply without meaning to. The breath behind me exhales too. Closer now. Close enough that the hairs along my arms lift, prickling as if brushed by unseen fingers. The cold settles into my spine, heavy and deliberate. I want to run. I want to scream. Instead, I stand there, listening to something that knows how I breathe. The fog thickens, pressing against my face, dampening sound. The world narrows to the space between my shoulders and whatever stands just beyond them. A faint pressure touches my coat. Not a hand, more like a presence leaning in. The trees seem farther away, the trail longer, the night deeper. I take one slow step forward. Footsteps follow, soft, barely there, but perfectly placed where mine were a moment before. I stop again. They stop. The breathing stays. A low rhythm, steady and calm, like it is all the time in the world. I can smell it now. Cold air mixed with something old. Dry leaves. Stone. Not alive the way I understand it. My thoughts feel loud. Too loud. I focus on the ground, on the pale shapes of needles half buried in fog. My shadow trembles with each shallow breath I take, stretching forward like it wants to escape. I whisper nothing. Say nothing. The forest leans closer. Another breath brushes my ear. This one feels curious, as if it's learning me. I feel suddenly small, outlined, defined, as though the thing behind me isn't chasing, it's comparing. I take another step, then another. Each movement is mirrored. The fog swallows the sound of my boots, but the footsteps behind me never disappear. They press into the quiet, leaving dents in silence. My chest tightens. The trail dips slightly, and colder air pools there, crawling up my legs. The breath behind me grows deeper, heavier as if pleased. I don't know how long I walk like this. Minutes, seconds, years. Time feels stretched thin, pulled tight between my fear and my need to keep moving. Finally, the breathing changes again. It slows. Then it stops. I wait. My ears ring with the absence of it. Carefully, too carefully, I turn my head just enough to glance over my shoulder. Fog. Only fog. Thick. Unbroken. No shape. No movement. The forest stands silent, as if it's never breathed at all. I face forward again. My own breath sounds wrong now. Too loud. Too exposed. I continue down the trail, every nerve awake, knowing with a quiet certainty. Even if I can't hear it anymore, something has learned how I breathe. The fog was already thick when I noticed the first light. It hovered low along the trail, just beyond the bend where the pines crowded close. A dull glow, soft, unsteady. Night had settled in fully by then. The kind of mountain night where sound feels padded, like the world is holding its breath. Cold pressed against my knuckles. Damp air clung to my lungs. I stopped walking. The light flickered once, not like a fire struggling for air, more like something remembering how to exist. I waited for footsteps, for voices, for the scrape of boots on stone. Nothing came. The fog shifted instead, curling around the glow as if it were being pulled toward it. The trees stood still, their black trunks rising like ribs. Shadows leaned inward. I took a step forward. The ground felt wrong beneath my boots. Too soft, layered with needles and wet leaves. Each movement made the silence tighten. The light didn't retreat. It watched. As I drew closer, the shape became clearer. A lantern, old, metal dulled by age, glass clouded but warm from within. It hung in the air at chest height, swaying slightly, though there was no wind. Heat brushed my face. It smelled faintly with smoke and rust, of something burned long ago. I reached out without thinking. My fingers passed through empty air. The lantern vanished. No fade, no dimming, just gone. The fog rushed in to fill the space it left behind, colder now, heavier. My hand trembled where warmth had been a moment before. I stood there longer than I meant to, listening. A second light appeared farther down the trail. Then another. 3 lanterns, spaced unevenly, floating between the trees. Their glow reflected off wet bark and pale stones, stretching shadows into long, broken shapes that didn't line up with anything real. I swallowed. Each breath felt loud. I followed them. The trail narrowed, swallowed by fog that brushed my cheeks and lips like damp cloth. Every few steps, the lanterns flickered, as if counting my movement. When I slowed, they steadied. When I stopped, they dimmed. I could feel it then, not being alone. The sense came from behind the lights, not ahead of them, like eyes resting just beyond the glow. Patient, still, I stepped closer to the nearest lantern. It lifted slightly, retreating just out of reach. The others drifted farther apart, drawing me forward deeper between the trees. The air grew warmer around each light, colder in the spaces between. My skin prickled as I passed through those gaps. A faint crackle followed me. Not fire, something softer, like breath moving through dry leaves. The lantern nearest to me winked out as I approached. Gone again. The remaining lights shifted, rearranging themselves farther down the trail, as if correcting a mistake. Fog poured over my boots. The ground sloped subtly, though I didn't remember the trail dipping here. I smelled smoke again. Stronger now. Fresh, but there was no fire. I stopped walking. The lanterns continued without me, gliding silently ahead until they hovered just at the edge of visibility. Their glow pulsed once, twice, waiting. My chest felt tight. Each inhale came shallow, fog-cold, tasting faintly of ash. The forest leaned closer, branches knitting overhead until the sky was nothing but pale blur. I took one more step. All the lanterns went out at once. Darkness collapsed inward. The fog thickened, swallowing even the memory of the light. I stood alone on the trail, heart thudding too fast, ears straining. Then a flicker behind me. I turned slowly. A single lantern floated where I had just been standing, closer than before. Its warmth brushed the back of my neck. I didn't reach for it this time. I backed away instead. The lantern followed. Each step I took, it drifted forward, matching the distance perfectly, never touching, never falling behind. The smell of smoke filled my head. The fog pressed closer, beating on my lashes, sliding cold along my jaw. I could hear my own breathing, uneven, too loud. When I stopped, the lantern stopped. We stayed like that. Me, the light, and whatever stood just beyond its glow. After a long moment, the lantern dimmed, not vanishing, just losing interest. The fog began to thin, slowly, reluctantly. The trail reappeared in fragments. Stone's roots, the dark line of earth leading away. The lantern drifted sideways, then back, until its glow dissolved into the mist. I didn't move for a long time, even when the smoke smell faded, even when the forest grew quiet again. Somewhere behind me, the fog whispered as it closed, and the dark felt fuller than it had before. Loose rocks scattered along the trail. I kicked one lightly, and a faint whisper curled through the air. At first, it was barely there, like a word half-formed, struggling to exist. Then another, soft, urgent, almost pleading. I froze. The wind was still, yet the voices persisted. They slid over each other, overlapping, like fragments of forgotten thoughts. I bent closer, tried to make sense of them. A name drifted clearly this time, my name. It lingered, stretched, as if the stones themselves had learned to speak. The forest around me felt thicker, older. Fog curled at the edges of the rocks, seeping between roots and boulders. Each whisper seemed to react to my movement, growing sharper when I leaned in. I wanted to step back, but curiosity pinned me in place. The stones murmured secrets I couldn't grasp, fragments of sentences, disjointed memories, echoes of things I hadn't seen. Every attempt to leave was met with the sound of my own name, carried in the hush of the wind. It wasn't playful. It wasn't a warning. It was waiting. I straightened, heart thumping, and the whispers faded slightly, retreating into the rocks. But the memory of their voices clung, cold and persistent. Even as I moved on, a soft trace followed me, unseen, unmistakable, haunting. A single branch stretched low across the trail. It was dark, slick with mist. I paused. A shadow perched atop it. Still, silent, watching. I blinked. The shape shifted, bending in ways that shouldn't be possible. When I looked again, it was gone. I thought I had imagined it, but the feeling remained. Eyes tracking, patient, unyielding. The forest around me was still. No wind, no rustle of leaves, only the quiet pressure of being observed. I took a careful step forward. The branch creaked faintly, though no weight had moved. Shadows around me seemed to stretch, reaching closer, curling along the ground. Each breath felt heavy, pulled into the cold, damp air. I wanted to move faster, but my feet felt rooted. A whisper tickled the edge of my ear, almost a word, almost a warning. I turned slowly. Nothing, yet I knew. Something unseen had mirrored me, mirrored my hesitation. The shadow never returned to its perch. It lingered elsewhere, close yet unseen. And I walked on, the hollow pressure of its gaze pressing into my back. I couldn't see it, couldn't hear it, but I knew I was not alone. The fog thinned just enough to reveal a small creek winding through the trees. Its water glimmered pale, reflecting shapes that didn't belong, faces, fleeting and impossible. I knelt, peering closer, and they vanished. The air smelled damp, earthy, yet carried a strange sweetness I couldn't place. The sound of water was soft at first. Then it deepened, resonating a low, echoing chant that seemed to pulse with the forest itself. I stepped closer, boots sinking slightly into mud. Ripples distorted the reflections, stretching faces into long, unfamiliar expressions. Each movement I made sent a shiver through the water. It felt as if the creek was aware. A shadow moved along the bank, slipping just out of sight. I couldn't tell if it belonged to the forest or something else. The fog thickened again, curling around the trees, heavy and watchful. The chant grew louder, though no lips moved. I wanted to leave, to turn away from the impossible reflections and the presence that lingered. But something in me was drawn, compelled by a curiosity I couldn't name. I traced the water's edge, careful not to disturb the murmur of the creek. Shadows flickered between trees, glimpses of movement too fast to follow. The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting, watching. And when I finally stepped back, the creek remained quiet again, pale and still. Yet the echo of the chant lingered in my mind. I knew the water remembered me, and I would remember it forever. Through the dense trees, pale light glimmered. It wasn't the moon, not exactly. Shadows twisted as the glow flickered between the trunks. Figures moved within it, just out of step, like memories half remembered. They shifted when I blinked, always avoiding direct gaze. The air smelled faintly of wet pine and smoke, though no fire burned. Each step I took pressed soft into the moss, sound muffled by the fog. Yet the forest felt alive, breathing, watching. I paused. The light brightened, then dimmed. A figure lingered, then disappeared, leaving only its echo in the mist. It was not threatening. Not yet. But the unease was unmistakable, curling into my chest. Leaves rustled without wind. I could hear faint whispers, indistinct, as though the light itself carried voices. Every glance caught movement, though nothing remained long enough to see clearly. I walked slowly, careful not to disturb the fragile balance of shadow and glow. The forest held me in a delicate tension, like it was showing me something I wasn't meant to fully understand. And when I finally stepped into a clearing, the light vanished entirely. Silence settled over the trees. Yet I could feel the presence of those figures lingering just beyond reach, watching, waiting. The fog thickened as I stepped forward. Shapes blurred at the edge of vision, but I felt it before I saw it. Eyes, countless, patient, tracking every movement. Shadows stretched across the ground, crawling along the trunks of trees. Yet when I turned, nothing remained. Only the mist, cold and still, swallowing sound. I slowed my steps. Every crunch of leaves echoed unnaturally, fading too quickly or too late. The forest seemed to lean in, holding its breath. A presence lingered just beyond the veil of fog. It didn't move like an animal nor like a person. It simply existed, patient and watchful, aware of me in ways I couldn't comprehend. The air felt heavier, thicker, pressing against my chest. I could sense the subtle shift of shadows, the curl of fog around unseen forms. Whispers tickled my ears, but no words formed. They were intentions, hints, impossibly quiet, yet unmistakable. I wanted to run, but every instinct, every step, felt monitored. The watcher in the fog was patient, waiting, and I could not tell if it would let me leave. I kept walking, every movement measured, every breath mirrored in the silence around me. And though I saw nothing, I could feel the eyes, following, always following. The forest was still. No breeze stirred the trees. Yet leaves rustled, soft, persistent, circling me. It wasn't random. Something invisible paced with me, following my steps. I stopped. The rustling stopped. A pause, deliberate. Then it began again when I moved. Shadows shifted, curling along the trunks, though the air remained motionless. Every step felt amplified, each breath mirrored in the quiet around me. The fog thickened, pressing against my skin, cold and damp. I wanted to call out, but my voice died in my throat. Something unseen walked with me, patient and relentless. I felt its presence, close enough to touch, yet untouchable. The rustling grew louder, sharper, more insistent. It was a warning, or a lure. I could not tell. I ran. Branches whipped at my face. Roots snagged my boots. But the sound behind me grew faster. Panic twisted in my chest as the invisible steps kept pace, never faltering, never stopping. And then, as abruptly as it began, the rustling ceased. The forest returned to stillness. I pressed on, heart hammering, knowing that something had been with me, and it had not left. The clearing opened beneath the full moon. Pale light spilled over the ground, silver and still. A lone silhouette stood frozen, unmoving, its form bent in ways that made my stomach tighten. I took a step forward. It shifted, mirroring me perfectly. The air smelled faintly of damp earth and something else, metal, cold, unfamiliar. Shadows stretched unnaturally, following the contour of its shape. I blinked, and it remained unmoved, yet alive. A shiver ran down my spine. I wanted to look away, to convince myself it was a trick of moonlight, but curiosity rooted me in place. Every movement I made, it copied. A tilt of my head, a step to the side, a hesitant breath. It mimicked me too well, too deliberately. The forest around us was silent. Even the fog held its breath, curling at the edges of the clearing. I realized with a cold dread that I was being observed and reflected. When I finally turned and ran, the silhouette didn't follow. Yet I felt it in my shadow, stretching, bending, waiting. The memory of its eyes, of its silent imitation, clung to me long after I left. Every step I took was echoed back, twisted, alien, not quite my voice, not quite mine. The pines swayed, though there was no wind. The static hum of the forest pressed against my ears. Each sound I made, footfall, breath, rustle of clothing, returned distorted, mocking, warning. I stopped. The echo stopped. Then it began again, slower this time, deliberate, like it was studying me. Shadows pooled between trunks, bending toward me, stretching impossibly long. I could feel the forest watching, waiting, learning. Every instinct told me to run. But my own voice rose from the ground, twisted, foreign, pulling me back. Leaves crunched underfoot. I blinked and the shadows shifted. Each movement I made was mirrored, replayed, twisted. I was alone and yet not. The hum grew louder, surrounding me, vibrating in my chest. I wanted to scream, but the sound returned as a distorted echo, strange and menacing. Panic surged. I ran. Branches tore at my sleeves, roots snagged my boots. The echoes chased me, repeating, anticipating. Even when I stopped, the distorted voice lingered. It knew where I was. It knew me, and I realized, finally, the forest had become alive with me inside it. Every whisper, every echo, a part of the pines themselves. A side trail appeared where none had existed before. Fog thickened immediately, swallowing familiar landmarks I had relied on. The path seemed to pulse, as if it had always been waiting for me. Each step felt inevitable, yet wrong. The trees leaned closer, branches brushing my shoulders, murmuring against my skin. Shadows shifted at the edge of vision, never still, never repeating. The air smelled damp and metallic, like earth disturbed after rain. I wanted to turn back, but the trail pressed forward, curling into mist. Every instinct screamed that I should not go, and still I walked. Soft whispers rose from the ground, carried in the fog. They were indistinct, half-formed sentences, like memories I had almost forgotten. The silence between each step stretched impossibly long, heavy, tense. The path twisted, curling back on itself, yet never leading where I expected. Footfalls behind me were soft, deliberate, echoing my own. I could not see who or what followed, and the fog thickened, hiding the origin completely. I pressed on. The deeper I went, the more the forest seemed alive, breathing, watching, waiting. And though the trail called to me, I knew it carried me further from safety. Yet I could not resist. Soft footfalls traced my steps, step for step, always behind me. I stopped. They stopped. My heart thumped in the quiet, heavy, loud. I ran. They accelerated, matching my pace perfectly. The fog thickened, swallowing the trees, hiding the origin. Every shadow seemed alive, stretching toward me. The air pressed cold against my skin, damp and dense. Leaves rustled in patterns I could not follow. It was deliberate, patient, waiting for me to falter. I dared to glance over my shoulder. Nothing, yet I felt it, eyes on me, unseen, relentless. My breath rose in short, uneven bursts. The fog clung to my clothes, my hair, my skin, as if trying to hold me still. Footfalls behind me, unceasing, echoed through the emptiness. I wanted to hide, to escape, but the forest had other plans. Every movement I made was mirrored, tracked, anticipated, and as the fog swallowed the path ahead, I realized I could not outrun it. The sound followed, soft, deliberate, always behind me. Lanterns floated through the fog, drifting like slow, ghostly spirits. Their light was warm, inviting, yet distant, never close enough to touch. I followed instinctively. The mist swallowed my feet, curling around my ankles, damp and cold. Each lantern seemed to move just ahead, guiding me, teasing me, and the trail never led back. Shadows twisted between the trees, elongated and fleeting. The lanterns flickered, sometimes vanishing entirely, leaving only pale mist and silence. I could smell faint traces with smoke, though no fire burned. The forest around me felt alive, watching, branches arched above, heavy with dew, bending as if to whisper secrets I could not hear. Every step I took felt anticipated, tracked, measured by something unseen. I wanted to turn away, to leave the drifting lights behind, but some part of me pressed forward, drawn by their glow, by their quiet insistence. And when I finally stopped, the lanterns had vanished entirely. The mist hung thick, undisturbed, as if nothing had moved at all. Yet I knew they would return, and I would follow them, again and again, lost in the drifting light. A hollow wind passed through the trees. It carried something almost like words, messages I couldn't fully understand, whispers curling just beyond comprehension. Branches bent unnaturally, leaves brushing my face without wind. Shadows stretched and warped, elongating toward me, then retreating. The forest seemed alive, breathing around me, watching. The fog thickened, cold and damp, pressing against my skin. Every step echoed softly, though nothing followed, and yet something trailed me. I could feel it, patient, invisible, aware of each movement I made. The air smelled of wet earth and moss, tinged with a faint metallic scent of something I could not name. I shivered, though the chill wasn't just the wind. It was the forest itself. It pulsed, alive, observing, waiting. Every direction looked the same, yet each path felt subtly wrong. I walked carefully, pressing forward, trying not to disturb the delicate tension around me. The hollow wind rose again, carrying fragments of whispers, hints of presence, of consciousness, of something that had been here long before me. I realized I was not just in the forest. The forest was in me, breathing, watching, waiting. Shadows detached from the trees, from rocks, from the fog itself. One lingered close, gliding along the ground, silent, patient. I couldn't look away, though dread pressed into my chest. Every instinct told me to run. Every instinct told me to stare. Branches bent unnaturally, curling as if to point toward the moving darkness. The fog swirled, thick and cold, pressing against my skin, curling around my boots. Leaves rustled, though the air was still, responding to the shadow's silent movement. It mirrored nothing, yet felt aware of me. Every step I took was measured, mirrored by empty space itself. I shivered, though no wind touched me. The forest around me seemed alive, holding its breath, and the shadow paused only when I blinked. I could not see its edges clearly, yet I felt its form everywhere at once. I wanted to look away. I wanted to run, but the compulsion to watch it, to follow, grew stronger with every heartbeat. And I knew, deep in the quiet of the forest, that it had always been here, waiting. The trail finally opened to the edge of the mountain. The fog lifted slowly, curling away from the trees, revealing the path behind me. Every presence I felt dissolved, or perhaps shifted. The air was still, heavy with damp earth and faint smoke. Silence stretched, absolute, yet heavy with memory. I felt the weight of every step I had taken, every shadow that followed, every whisper that had called my name. The forest seemed to breathe around me one last time. Branches creaked softly, leaves rustled faintly, but the threatening pressure had gone, leaving only the echo of unease. I took a step forward, then another, and with each step, the trail seemed to fold back into itself, leaving me alone, yet carrying the forest within me. The sky above was pale, untouched by moon or fog. A quiet settled into my chest, deep and absolute. I realized I had left nothing behind, and yet I had taken everything with me. The lingering unease remained, soft, almost imperceptible. As I walked away from the mountain, the silence stretched behind me, complete, absolute, and final.